Have you ever had that nightmare where you're running, but you can't get away? Where everyone you know and trust suddenly looks at you with suspicion? For Detective Jack Carver, that nightmare just became his reality. And it all started with a single anonymous phone call on a rainy Tuesday night. The call led him to the old waterfront warehouse district, a place where secrets go to die. The air was thick with the smell of salt and decay. Inside, under the weak glow of a single flickering bulb, was a scene straight out of a horror film. And in the center of it all, a chalk outline. This was Jack's case now. Homicide. The victim was a high-profile accountant, a man with his fingers in too many dangerous pies. The press was already calling it the Ledger killing. Jack was the best. Meticulous, relentless. He lived for the details, the tiny inconsistencies that unraveled the biggest lies. He started processing the scene, his mind a whirlwind of possibilities. The entry point, the lack of forced entry, the strange symbols scrawled on the wall, it was all a puzzle, and Jack was born to solve it. But then he saw it, a glint of metal near the body. He bagged it, tagged it, a custom cufflink. It looked familiar. He shook off the feeling. In this job, everything starts to look familiar after a while. Back at the precinct, the investigation kicked into high gear. The first 48 hours are everything. Jack and his partner, Detective Miller, pulled all-nighters, fueled by stale coffee and a burning need for justice. They dug into the victim's life-angry clients, a secret gambling addiction, a messy divorce. The list of potential suspects was a mile long. But every lead they chased turned into a dead end. It was like they were running in circles, always one step behind a ghost. Then, the first piece of evidence came back from the lab, a fingerprint. Lifted from the victim's briefcase. Jack leaned over the report, his heart pounding with anticipation. This was it. The break they needed. He read the name next to the print match, and the world tilted on its axis. The name was his. Detective Jack Carver. It had to be a mistake. A lab error. A clerical screw-up. Jack's prints were in the system, of course. He'd been at the scene. It was explainable. Contamination. He told himself that over and over. Miller tried to reassure him. But for the first time, Jack saw a flicker of doubt in his partner's eyes. The seed of suspicion was planted. Then the second piece of evidence landed. The cufflink. The lab report was definitive. It was a one-of-a-kind design, a gift Jack had received for his 10-year anniversary on the force. A gift he'd reported stolen from his apartment 2 months ago. A coincidence? Maybe, but the coincidences were starting to stack up, forming a wall around him. He could feel the whispers in the precinct, the sideways glances. The hunter was becoming the hunted. Jack knew he couldn't just sit back and let the evidence pile up. He had to work his own case, from the outside in. He started re-examining everything, not as the lead detective, but as the prime suspect. Who would want to frame him? Who had the access, the knowledge, the motive? He pulled his own case files, looking for old enemies, criminals he'd put away who might be holding a grudge. The list was long. Too long. His captain, a man who had been his mentor, called him into his office. The conversation was brief and brutal. Jack, I have to take you off the case. And I need your badge and your weapon. The words hit him like a physical blow. He was suspended. A cop without a badge is just a civilian. A civilian who happened to be the prime suspect in a murder investigation. Now he was truly alone. He couldn't trust the system he'd dedicated his life to. He couldn't even trust his own partner. Miller was a good cop, but he followed the evidence. And right now, all the evidence pointed directly at Jack. He had to go off the grid. He started his own shadow investigation from a rundown motel room, the kind with flickering neon signs and questionable stains on the carpet. Using burner phones and cash, he reached out to old informants, calling in favors he never thought he'd need. He was looking for a ghost, a mastermind smart enough to set up a detective, someone who knew police procedure inside and out. Someone who knew him. The pieces started to come together, not from official evidence, but from whispers in the criminal underworld. The victim, the accountant, was laundering money for a powerful, unseen figure. A figure known only as the architect. This architect was cleaning house, eliminating anyone who could tie him to his operations. But why frame Jack? What was the connection? He revisited the crime scene in his mind, over and over. That symbol on the wall. It wasn't random. He'd seen it before, years ago on a cold case file. A case that went unsolved. A case that involved a disgraced cop. A cop who'd been kicked off the force for evidence tampering. A cop who had been Jack's first partner. Frank Rizzo. Could it be? Rizzo had vanished after being fired. Everyone assumed he'd left the city ashamed. But what if he hadn't? What if he'd spent years building a new life in the shadows, fueled by resentment? A resentment aimed squarely at the man who had replaced him. The golden boy who got all the praise. Jack Carver. It was a long shot, a crazy theory built on a fragile foundation. But it was the only thing that made sense. Rizzo knew his habits, his procedures. He could have stolen the cufflink. He could have found a way to lift Jack's fingerprint and plant it at the scene. He had the motive, the means, and the opportunity. Now Jack had a target. But how do you find a ghost? He knew Rizzo had a weakness, his ego. He needed to be seen, to be acknowledged. The symbol was the key. It was Rizzo's signature. Jack leaked an anonymous tip to a local news blogger, a known conspiracy theorist, claiming the symbol was linked to a secret society within the police force. He knew Rizzo wouldn't be able to resist taking the bait, to correct the story, to claim his masterpiece. The trap was set. Jack monitored the blog's comments section, waiting. And then, it appeared. A comment from a user named True Justice for All, correcting the blogger's theory with intimate details of the crime. Scene details only the killer could know. Jack used his old cybercrime contacts to trace the IP address. It led to a disused factory on the other side of town. He knew going there alone was suicide. But calling the police was impossible. They were hunting him. He was out of options. He grabbed a crowbar from his car, his only weapon, and went in. The factory was a maze of rusted machinery and shadows. And in the center, a single light illuminated a workspace. There he was. Frank Rizzo. Older, harder, but instantly recognizable. He wasn't surprised to see Jack. He was expecting him. "Took you long enough, Jackie boy," Rizzo sneered. "I have to admit, I was getting worried you'd lost your touch." Rizzo confessed everything. His burning jealousy, his years spent planning his revenge. The accountant was just a pawn. The real target was always Jack. Rizzo wanted to destroy his life, his reputation, everything he held dear, just like Jack had supposedly destroyed his. As Rizzo monologued, basking in his own twisted genius, Jack saw his opening. He wasn't the young detective Rizzo remembered. He was smarter, tougher. He used Rizzo's ego against him, goading him, making him angry. As Rizzo lunged, Jack was ready. The fight was short and brutal, a desperate struggle for survival among the ghosts of industry. But in the end, Jack stood victorious. He made one call. To his partner, Miller. He didn't explain. He just gave him the address. When the sirens finally arrived, they found Jack, bruised and exhausted, standing over a bound and gagged Frank Rizzo. And next to him, a laptop open to the blog comments, and a full recorded confession from Rizzo's phone, which Jack had managed to activate during the confrontation. The evidence was undeniable. The frame fell apart. Jack's name was cleared. He was a hero. But as he stood outside the factory, watching the sunrise on a new day, he didn't feel like a hero. He felt ... changed. He had looked into the abyss, and it had looked back. He had been forced to operate outside the law he swore to uphold, to become a shadow in order to find the light. Justice was served, but the cost was high. The nightmare was over, but he knew he would never truly wake up. Thanks so much for sticking with us through that intense story. If you love thrilling mysteries and stories of justice against all odds, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. We'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.